Howdy dowdy bug buds, welcome back to yet another video in my Transportation Tales mini-series, which, for those unfamiliar, is a series on my channel where I rant about my previous experiences on public transport. Now, for today's episode, we're gonna go back in time to my first semester of uni. Again, I know, but this time we're looking at the end of the semester, in particular, finals period. Now, for a little bit of context, my uni had your standard 13-week term with the 14th week given as a study week, which, just as the name suggests, was a week where you could freely revise your subjects. That way, you wouldn't completely choke your finals over the next 3 weeks. However, for some strange reason, the uni decided to start finals a little bit earlier than anticipated. And by that, I mean it actually started on the Friday, which sucked for me because I was in the business faculty, and the uni just loved making us do our exams way before everyone else. And sure, you can say, well, at least you get to finish your exams early, but for me personally, I'd like to have a little more than 4 days to study for all my subjects. Especially since they just loved putting them right next to each other, so you barely had a break in between them. Plus, to make matters worse, because these exams were typically held in the morning, it meant I had to leave super early just so I could make it on time. Yeah, when I say I dreaded exam season, this is why. Anyway, I'm kinda going on a tangent, so let's get back to the story. Rightio, back on track. So for this story, we're gonna go back in time to the first day of the exam period. That is, the first Friday. Because my exam was on a common first year course, the cohort was exceptionally big. And because of that, they didn't have the inbuilt capacity to hold all the students on campus. So, we were all forced to go to an off-campus examination room. Now, the ride there isn't actually important. Rather, we'll be focusing on the exam itself. So, in order to combat cheating, we were only allowed to bring in a select few items. You know, stuff like pens, pencils, erasers, and university-approved calculators, among some other things. But the most important thing you had to bring was your student ID. That way, the inspectors could verify that you were the person meant to be taking the exam. As I entered the room, an inspector gave me a card with a number and a letter on it, which indicated the row and column I was to be seated at. Then, right before the exam started, the inspector checked to make sure that the card matched the desk number and that my ID matched the name I wrote down. But the thing is, after the inspector finished checking my ID and letter number card thingy, she placed the card on top of my ID, which, sadly, I didn't realise at the time. Anyway, so the exam proceeded, blah blah blah, and then about 3/4 into it, I was busting to go to the little bugs room. I held it in, but once the exam finished, I quickly collected my things and bolted straight to the toilets. But because I was in such a rush, I didn't think about checking underneath the card. And just like that, I left without my student ID. The next day, I had another exam at the same examination hall. And yes, before you asked, the uni didn't hesitate to put exams on the weekend too. Now, because it was a Saturday, the bus and train timetables were different, meaning I had to leave even earlier than before. And because I didn't take out anything from the day before, I left without bothering to check I had everything I needed. Now, the first bus ride was fine, but the train ride on the other hand, oof. That was nerve-wracking to say the least. As I had nothing better to do, I decided to double check that my calculators weren't dead. But while I was checking, I noticed that my student ID was missing from the plastic bag it was meant to be in. And this made me panic. I triple checked to see if maybe it was hidden in the case of a calculator, or if it was in the bottom of my bag. But alas, I couldn't find it. I even checked my wallet in the small chance I moved it there without thinking. But unfortunately for me, no luck. Now, you might be wondering why I was making such a big deal about not having my student card. And to answer that question, it's because on top of not being able to attend the exam, you could also get hit by a very hefty fine for travelling without a student card. And this is because at the time I was using a type of student discounted travel card, where one of the requirements was to provide proof you were a student when asked, i.e. by showing the travel inspector your student ID. And because it was a weekend morning, I knew there was a very high chance I'd be getting checked, as the inspectors typically did these checks at odd hours. But then I had a light bulb. I would just open up my laptop and show them that I was a student because I was already logged into my uni profile. As my profile had my name, photo, and examination times, it only made sense that this could be used as proof, right? So I sat there waiting for them to come, practicing in my mind what I'd say to them, and then, just as I expected, they came. But before they could even ask, I immediately explained to them that I had left my ID in the examination hall yesterday and that I could get it back right before my exam. But understandably, they were quite suspicious of me because I was travelling super early and on a weekend nonetheless. So, just as I had planned, I showed them my uni profile and how it matched my other ID at the time, but then they handed me a piece of paper. And at this point, I was on the verge of tears because I thought I was going to get slammed with a fine. But turns out it was all good, and that in special circumstances, lenience could be given, so long as the reasoning was good enough. And because I had no prior offences, showed some degree of proof, and explained what happened sufficiently, I was left off with a cautionary warning, meaning after all that worrying, I was safe. The piece of paper they gave me was actually a ticket I could use later on to show other inspectors in the future. That way, I wouldn't have to worry about explaining the situation over and over. And let me tell you, that definitely helped alleviate some stress. But one thing to note is that this ticket was only for the way there, because we were all under the assumption that I could just collect my ID once I arrived. So, I eventually made it to the off-campus site with enough time to spare to ask one of the inspectors if they happened to have my ID from yesterday. Turns out they did have it, but they sent it to the university's lost and found, meaning I'd have to take another bus afterwards to get my ID. Anyway, the exam started and thankfully they let me use another form of ID for the exam. As for how I went, to put it plainly, terrible. Because the exam ended at about 11:30 and the note I was given was only valid until 10 AM, I spent a good chunk of the exam stressed because I had no clue what I was supposed to do. If I was caught travelling without my student card after saying I would have it, it would seem as though I was lying, and that could potentially get me into even more trouble. So yeah, I flopped hard. Didn't even need to say my mark to know I went bad. Anyway, after the exam I couldn't take the same bus as everyone else because they were all going back to the station. So alone, I thought to myself, why don't I just take the same bus I took in the morning? It passes by the uni, so logically, that makes sense, right? So I got on the bus and told the bus driver that I didn't have my ID and asked if I could get a single trip ticket, to which he replied not to worry about and that it was fine. The bus started driving and after a couple of minutes, I realised that the bus was taking the wrong route. Yeah, turns out that the bus took a different route depending on the hour, so I was going in a completely different direction to who knows where. Then, to make matters worse, the bus driver stopped so he could switch places with a new driver, which, sucked for me because he was my vouch. So now I was stuck in a predicament where I could get in trouble again, just because the original driver said it was fine. Eventually, fear got the better of me, and I ended up getting off at some random stop. That way, I would have a chance to recollect my thoughts and think of what to do. But nothing. Head empty, mind blank, my brain was completely out of commission. So, what did I do? Well, I called my mum for help, of course. She already knew I was hopeless with directions, so it's not like it was even that embarrassing for me. Anyway, she told me what bus I should get on, and when I got there, lo and behold, it was the same bus driver as before, which was great for me because it meant I didn't have to explain the situation again. Then, after all that, I finally made it back to the train station. But as I was walking, someone grabbed my wrist from behind, and I was petrified. Was I getting robbed? Was this another train inspector here to find me? Well, no, it was neither. It was just some random guy who I'd never seen before. After grabbing my wrist, he then hugged me and ran back to some girl who mouthed sorry as they left. Yeah, make of that what you will. And if you're confused as to why they did it, welcome to the club. From the way they were acting, it was probably a dare, but why? Why me? Why today of all days? We'll never know. Anyway, I awkwardly continued my journey, and because I didn't want to get into any more trouble, I informed one of the train officers what happened. Thankfully, she gave me another permission slip, and with that, I was able to go home. Also, yes, I did decide to go home instead of trying to go back to uni. I already wasted enough time as it was, and I still needed to start studying for my next exams, because your boy was not prepared for those two, let me tell you that. So, I arrived home and called the uni, asking if they could potentially mail me my student ID, but they were like, oh, postage would take at least a week to arrive. Like, what? What was even the point then? Anyway, because of that, I ended up having to use a default non-student travel card for the following Monday and Tuesday exams. And luckily for me, because my last exam was on campus, it meant I could just pick it up without any trouble. Now, instead of going home, I actually ended up staying back so I could play Pokemon Go, which, before you start commenting how sad and pathetic it is, I know, but I didn't live near any Pokestops and I desperately needed to stack some Pokeballs before the holidays began. Also, I know this part seems super random and out of place, but I'm mentioning it now because it actually leads to another story in the future. So, you know, look forward to that, I guess. Okie dokie bug buds, so that takes us to the end of this video. Now, what did we all learn from this? Always check for your belongings before leaving, especially your IDs. Anyway, I guess that's it. I don't think there's much else to say. So, if you did like this video, liking or subscribing would mean a lot. With that said, stay safe and don't let the bed bugs bite. Love you all, bye bye!